Before the first clocks ticked, before science had language for light or hormone or time, the world already moved to a rhythm older than thought itself, the rhythm of night and day. Every creature, every leaf, every cell lived by that invisible pulse, turning inward when the sun sank and stirring again when dawn spilled its gold over the earth. For humanity, this cycle was the first measure of time, not counted in numbers but in the closing of eyelids and the sigh of waking breath. In ancient times, sleep was a mystery wrapped in reverence. To the early peoples of Mesopotamia, it was the realm of the gods of dreams, where messages and visions drifted between worlds. The Egyptians saw sleep as a gentle rehearsal for death, a nightly journey of the soul through darkness toward light. The Greeks gave sleep a name, hypnos, brother to thanatos, death itself, but far kinder, a temporary surrender rather than an ending. The ancients watched the heavens and learned the language of the sky. They saw how life bent itself to light. Flowers opened with the sunrise and closed at dusk. Roosters crowed at the first hint of dawn, long before human calendars existed. Fishermen knew tides, farmers knew seasons, and shepherds marked time by the constellations overhead. Life was a clock wound by the sun. Without electric light, darkness was absolute. When the sun disappeared, the world grew hushed. Flames from hearths flickered, casting orange shadows on walls, and people felt the weight of stillness descend. It was not only the body that quieted, but the mind. Night was both a pause and a reset, a sacred time when the world itself seemed to inhale and rest. In every ancient civilization, rituals surrounded this nightly surrender. The Vedic traditions of India spoke of a cosmic order, letter 1E5bta, that governed not only the stars but the human body, binding it to the universal rhythm. In China, healers of the Han dynasty described how the energies of yin and yang flowed in cycles through the organs, dictating when one should wake, eat, work, and sleep. The philosophers of Greece and Rome noticed the same harmony in their own way. Aristotle mused that sleep was the body's restoration of balance, a time when the flame of life burned lower, so it might shine brighter at dawn. But though these early minds sensed the order of rhythm, they could not see its source. To them, sleep was the touch of gods or the pull of the moon, not chemistry or light. Yet their observations were keen. They saw that sleep came earlier in winter, later in summer, that animals who lived underground kept strange hours, that illness could disrupt the cycles of rest. They were, unknowingly, describing what we now call circadian rhythm, the daily internal clock ticking within every living thing. When darkness fell, something within the human body changed. Though they did not yet have the words, ancient observers noted the heaviness of eyelids, the cooling of the skin, the slowing of breath. It was as if some unseen tide pulled gently upon the mind, inviting it to drift into the deep. For thousands of years, this nightly transformation was accepted without question. Sleep simply was. Only with the birth of modern science would people begin to ask why. But centuries before laboratories and microscopes, poets and priests had already intuited that sleep was no mere absence. It was a state of profound repair. The body that toiled under the sun healed beneath the moon. Even in myth, this truth lingered. In the Greek imagination, Hypnos lived in a cave where night and day met, surrounded by poppies that dripped the nectar of dreams. The Romans believed that Somnus sprinkled his dust over the weary, granting release from thought. Across continents, cultures saw in sleep a rhythm so vital that even the earth itself seemed to share it. The fields resting in winter, the seas quieting at night, the stars wheeling in eternal pattern. When humanity began to study the heavens with precision, a new realization dawned. The rhythm of life was mathematical. Astronomers measured the Earth's rotation and found that the span between sunrise and sunrise, 24 hours, matched the cycles of countless living things. From the blooming of flowers to the migration of birds, the universe seemed wound to the same clock. The body, too, followed that unseen metronome. Long before anyone could detect hormones or neural signals, the evidence was written in the human experience. Sleep came in waves, dreams followed patterns, and even the sick recovered in rhythmic intervals. Physicians of the Middle Ages, though bound by superstition, recorded observations that pointed to the truth, that the body's vitality ebbed and flowed not only with age but with time itself. For centuries, thinkers sought the organ of this mystery. Where did the rhythm come from? What part of the body commanded sleep? The heart, the brain, the soul. By the Renaissance, curiosity turned inward. Anatomists began to map the brain, uncovering its folds and chambers, searching for the seat of consciousness. Amid their discoveries, one tiny structure caught their eye, a small, pinecone-shaped gland buried deep in the center of the brain. The pineal gland, they called it. To most, it seemed insignificant, a mere curiosity among greater mysteries. But to one philosopher, it was something far more profound. René Descartes, the French thinker who sought to divide body from mind, believed that the pineal gland was the bridge between the two, the seat of the soul. From this small organ, he thought, the immaterial spirit directed the physical body, uniting thought and motion. Though his theory was wrong in form, it was right in instinct. The pineal gland was indeed a bridge not to the soul, but to rhythm itself. Centuries later, scientists would learn that this unassuming gland was the source of melatonin, the molecule that whispers night to every cell in the body. But in Descartes' time, that revelation was still hidden, like a secret sealed within the folds of the brain. The world slept and woke, night followed day, and humanity dreamed on, unaware that deep within, a chemical light dimmed and brightened in perfect synchrony with the sun. The history of melatonin begins not in a laboratory, but in the simple truth that life itself is rhythmic. Every creature, from the smallest bacterium to the tallest tree, obeys the cycles of light and dark. The discovery of melatonin would one day reveal the machinery behind that harmony, but for millennia, people only felt its effects. They knew the peace of sleep, the clarity of morning, the pull of drowsiness when the stars rose. Before science, before hormone, before name, there was only the rhythm of the world. And somewhere within the brain of every creature that lived by the sun and slept by the moon, a secret waited patiently in the dark, a molecule of night, a messenger of rest, a whisper of balance. Melatonin was already there. Humanity just hadn't met it yet. Deep within the human skull, hidden behind folds of tissue and rivers of blood, lies a structure no larger than a grain of rice. It is small, pale, and perfectly shaped like the cone of a pine tree. For most of human history, it was little more than an anatomical curiosity, a mystery glimpsed but not understood. Yet from that tiny gland, nature whispers the rhythm of night to every living thing. The story of the pineal gland begins long before its discovery. When early anatomists dared to open the human body, they found wonders that both awed and frightened them. In the medieval world, dissection was an act that bordered on the forbidden, a transgression against the sanctity of the body. But curiosity is relentless. Physicians, scholars, and philosophers risked condemnation to explore the machinery of life, believing that by understanding the body, they might glimpse the soul. Among the first to describe the pineal gland was Galen, the great physician of the Roman Empire. He noticed the small, conical organ near the center of the brain and named it canarium, the little cone. To him, it seemed like a valve or gate controlling the flow of animal spirits, the mysterious substance thought to animate thought and motion. It was neither brain nor bone, neither nerve nor vessel, something other. Galen's words would echo through the centuries, casting the pineal gland as an enigma rather than an organ. For over 1,000 years, medicine accepted Galen's authority. The pineal gland was mentioned but never explored, an afterthought in the grand architecture of the body. When scholars of the Middle Ages translated his works into Latin and Arabic, they repeated his descriptions without challenge. The gland was seen as a tiny ornament in the cathedral of the brain, decorative perhaps, but without function. It was not until the Renaissance, when anatomy became both art and science, that the pineal gland caught the world's attention again. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci drew the human skull in exquisite detail, capturing the layers of bone, vein, and tissue. Leonardo himself illustrated the pineal region, fascinated by how the brain seemed to center its structure around it. To him, as to many thinkers of his age, symmetry was divine, and the pineal gland's position at the heart of the brain suggested purpose. Then came René Descartes. In the 17th century, this philosopher and mathematician sought to separate the physical from the spiritual, the machine from the soul. He believed that the body was a mechanism, an intricate clockwork of nerves and muscles, but that consciousness, thought, will, emotion, was something immaterial. Where then did the two meet? Where did mind and matter converse? Descartes searched the body for a bridge, and he found it in the pineal gland. Unlike other structures which came in pairs, 2 eyes, 2 hemispheres, 2 kidneys, the pineal stood alone, singular and central. This, Descartes' reason, must be the seat of the soul. From here, he imagined, the spirit guided the body, moving its levers and sensing its pains. It is the principal seat of the soul, he wrote, and the place in which all our thoughts are formed. For Descartes, the pineal gland was not a physical device but a metaphysical symbol, the meeting point between heaven and flesh. His idea enchanted and bewildered thinkers for centuries. Even as medicine advanced, the notion of the gland as a spiritual organ persisted in philosophy and mysticism. In India and the East, parallels were drawn between the pineal gland and the third eye of spiritual vision, the inner sight that perceives truth beyond illusion. Though such ideas were metaphors, they captured something profound: that the pineal gland was a window between worlds, whether of spirit or of sleep. Science, however, is built on observation, not metaphor. As the centuries turned, curiosity returned to the pineal gland, not as a seat of the soul, but as a biological mystery. In the 18th and 19th centuries, anatomists cataloged the brain with growing precision. They found that the pineal gland existed in almost every vertebrate species: reptiles, birds, mammals, even fish, a universal feature, yet still obscure. It seemed less a philosopher's symbol and more a thread of evolution, carried from primitive life into the human brain. When scientists dissected the pineal of lizards and birds, they discovered something extraordinary. In some species, it resembled a light-sensitive organ. Under the thin skin of certain reptiles, the pineal had photoreceptor cells, similar to those in the eye. These animals, it seemed, could sense daylight directly through this hidden organ, a literal third eye. The ancient poets had not been entirely wrong. This revelation changed everything. The pineal gland was not vestigial, not mystical, it was sensory. It had evolved from an ancient photoreceptive organ that once guided primitive creatures in their cycles of rest and activity. In higher animals, its visual function faded, but its sensitivity to light remained, translated into chemistry rather than sight. The gland no longer saw light, it felt it. By the late 19th century, physiologists began to suspect that the pineal gland played a role in regulating the body's rhythms. They observed that animals kept in darkness behaved differently, their feeding and sleeping cycles altered. Yet no one knew how. The pineal was still a puzzle box, its workings invisible. Then came the age of microscopes. With lenses that could peer deeper than ever before, scientists examined the pineal structure. They found clusters of cells unlike those in other parts of the brain, cells that looked glandular, not neural, suggesting secretion. But secretion of what? The answer at the time was beyond reach. The 19th century was a period of speculation. Some thought the pineal gland produced cerebrospinal fluid. Others called it a vestigial remnant, a leftover from evolution. A few daring minds proposed that it might release a substance influencing sleep or wakefulness, but evidence was scarce. Still, the whispers grew. As electricity illuminated the night, and industrial life stretched human wakefulness beyond the natural boundary of sunset, the question of sleep became urgent again. Doctors wrote of nervous exhaustion, insomnia, and fatigue of the modern age. The world was changing, and the human body, long governed by daylight, struggled to keep pace. Somewhere inside, the pineal gland, the ancient eye of rhythm, remained tuned to the old clock, even as humanity rewrote its schedule in artificial light. By the dawn of the 20th century, one truth had become clear. The pineal gland was no mere ornament. It was active, responsive, alive. Scientists could see that it changed shape and size with age, that it contained secretory granules, that it was connected to the brain's deepest centers of regulation. The stage was set for discovery, though the world still waited for the right mind, the right tools, and the right moment. That moment would arrive in 1958 when a Yale dermatologist named Aaron B. Lerner looked not to the sky or to philosophy, but to the chemistry of the human brain and found, within the pineal gland, a molecule that carried the night itself. But before Lerner's pipette touched its first droplet of extract, the story of the pineal gland had already spanned millennia, from Galen's ancient descriptions to Descartes' spiritual musings, to the microscopes of modern science. It had moved from the realm of myth to the edge of biology, waiting quietly for the discovery that would transform it from mystery to mechanism. The secret within the brain was about to reveal its true name: melatonin, the messenger of darkness, the conductor of sleep, the molecule of night. The year was 1958. In a quiet laboratory at Yale University, surrounded by glass beakers, scalpels, and the steady hum of refrigeration units, a dermatologist named Dr. Aaron B. Lerner was looking for a way to turn darkness into light. He did not know it yet, but what he would find would instead reveal the opposite, a substance that dimmed the body's light, slowing its rhythm and inviting rest. Lerner was not searching for sleep. His original focus was pigment. As a dermatologist, he was studying how the body controlled skin color, the biology of tanning, freckles, and vitiligo. In frogs, it was well known that a small gland in the brain somehow influenced the color of their skin, lightening or darkening it in response to environment. The connection was strange, almost poetic. A gland buried in the skull could change the brightness of the body. That gland, of course, was the pineal. Lerner's curiosity sharpened on a simple question: what chemical from the pineal gland controlled pigment? If he could isolate it, perhaps it could treat skin disorders or even reveal new ways the body regulated itself. So he and his team began an experiment that was as delicate as it was ambitious. They obtained pineal glands from cows, small, grayish organs no bigger than a pea. From thousands of these, they extracted chemical compounds, concentrating them in test tubes, refining them again and again. Each droplet was precious. They would test each extract by adding it to samples of frog skin in shallow dishes, watching for color change under the lab light. The results were subtle at first, a flicker of lightness, a shift in tone. But one particular fraction caused the frog's skin to pale dramatically. The pigment granules within the skin cells drew inward, leaving the skin nearly translucent. It was as if the frogs themselves had sensed nightfall. They had found it a compound that signaled darkness. Lerner named it melatonin, from the Greek melos for black and tonos for tone, literally, the one that affects black pigment. But soon, he and others would discover that its effects went far beyond color. In the months that followed, Lerner's laboratory became the quiet cradle of a revolution. When the team injected the substance into animals, strange things happened. The animals became calmer, their body temperatures dropped slightly, and their activity slowed, as though the night had settled over their nervous systems. Even in the absence of darkness, their bodies behaved as if it were time to rest. What Lerner had discovered was not simply a pigment regulator. It was a timekeeper, a biochemical messenger that told the body when it was night. Though the concept of a biological clock had been proposed, it was still mysterious. Scientists knew that many processes in the body temperature, hormone release, sleep, followed a daily rhythm, but no one understood how those rhythms were synchronized with the day and night. Lerner's discovery hinted that the answer lay in this tiny molecule from the pineal gland. Melatonin, they learned, was produced in darkness. When light struck the eyes, signals traveled along nerves to the brain, suppressing its release. When darkness returned, the gland awakened, secreting melatonin into the bloodstream. Like a silent conductor, it orchestrated the body's nightly symphony, slowing heart rate, lowering temperature, and whispering to every cell, "It is time to rest." The discovery spread quietly at first. Lerner published his results in 1958 in the Journal of the American Chemical Society, describing the chemical structure and effects. Few at the time grasped its importance. Yet those who did realized that science had just uncovered one of the body's most ancient rhythms, a link between light, brain, and rest that reached back through millions of years of evolution. In the following years, laboratories around the world joined the investigation. They found that melatonin existed not only in mammals but in birds, reptiles, amphibians, even fish, and that it functioned similarly in all of them. It was, quite literally, the hormone of night, produced by nearly every living thing that slept or hid when darkness fell. Evolution had written this molecule into the script of life itself. The implications were profound. Melatonin was not only about sleep, it was about time. It helped animals know when to migrate, when to mate, when to hibernate. It adjusted the clockwork of the body to the turning of the planet. For the first time, humanity glimpsed the chemistry behind the sensation of night. For Lerner himself, the discovery brought recognition, but also humility. He understood that melatonin's potential was vast, but its secrets would take generations to uncover. "It is," he wrote later, "a molecule with a message, one we are still learning to translate." In the 1960s, research deepened. Scientists measured melatonin levels in humans and found a clear rhythm: high during the night, low during the day. It was as if every cell in the body was listening to the same quiet lullaby sung by the pineal gland. To measure the hormone required patience and precision. The amounts were tiny, trillionths of a gram in a milliliter of blood. But technology advanced, and with it came clarity. Melatonin levels rose soon after sunset, peaked in the early hours of morning, and fell as dawn approached. The rhythm was so consistent that doctors could tell if someone had been exposed to light at night simply by examining their melatonin curve. Suddenly, science had a measurable window into the biology of sleep. The molecule of darkness, as some began to call it, had become a tangible thread connecting light, time, and the human mind. Even more astonishing was the discovery that melatonin did not just respond to light, it regulated the body's response to it. When melatonin rose, the body cooled slightly, muscles relaxed, and the mind drifted toward slumber. When it fell, the senses sharpened, alertness returned, and energy renewed. It was the internal mirror of the sun's path, rising and falling like a tide within. Lerner's discovery had also raised a question that would preoccupy scientists for decades. If melatonin governed the rhythm of sleep, could it be used to restore that rhythm when it faltered? Could the molecule of night become a medicine? The idea lingered quietly for years. In the 1960s and 70s, researchers studied melatonin's role in seasonal breeding in animals and in human circadian rhythms. Yet it remained largely a scientific curiosity, fascinating, but not yet practical. It would take another few decades for melatonin to step from the laboratory into everyday life. Still, the groundwork was laid. From Lerner's frog experiments, through chemical isolation and animal testing, to the recognition of its nightly surge in humans, the story of melatonin had moved from mystery to mechanism. What had once been myth, the pull of sleep, the hush of night, had become molecule and signal, a symphony of neurons and hormones tuned by the turning of the earth. Humanity had discovered that within its own brain was a trace of the ancient world's rhythm, the same rhythm that guided the opening of flowers, the migration of birds, and the beating of hearts. In 1958, A scientist looking at pale frog skin had, without intending it, uncovered the chemistry of sleep. And in doing so, he gave the world its first glimpse of the substance that lets us drift gently into the dark. The discovery of melatonin in 1958 had illuminated a hidden part of biology, but it would take years before the world understood what this small, simple molecule truly meant. In laboratories across Europe, the United States, and Japan, scientists began to trace its rhythm, not just in animals but in human blood, tissues, and breath. The patterns they found were unmistakable. Melatonin rose with nightfall and faded with dawn, rising and falling as faithfully as the turning of the earth itself. It became clear that this molecule was not merely another hormone, not simply one chemical among thousands. Melatonin was the body's internal nightfall, the quiet messenger that whispered darkness has come to every cell. In the early 1960s, this realization began to reshape the understanding of human sleep. Until then, sleep had been seen largely as a mechanical process, a matter of fatigue, habit, and brain activity. The discovery of rapid eye movement, REM sleep, had already transformed research, showing that the sleeping brain was not still but active, cycling through patterns of dreams and restoration. Now, melatonin offered something deeper, a signal that governed when those cycles began. Researchers began by mapping the hormone's daily curve. They drew blood samples from volunteers around the clock, students, night shift workers, even soldiers stationed in polar outposts where the sun disappeared for months. The results were astonishingly consistent. In nearly all subjects, melatonin levels began to rise about 2 hours after sunset, peaked around 2 or 3 a.m., then declined toward morning. Even when people were isolated from natural light, the rhythm continued, as if their bodies carried a built-in clock, ticking somewhere deep within the brain. That clock, scientists found, resided in a region called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, a cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus just above where the optic nerves cross. The pineal gland and the suprachiasmatic nucleus formed a partnership. The latter sensed light through the eyes and instructed the pineal when to release melatonin. Light, brain, and body were bound in a single elegant circuit. This was more than biology, it was harmony. The entire body was a symphony of timing, heartbeats, temperature, hormones, alertness, hunger, all playing their parts in a daily composition. And at the center of that symphony was melatonin, rising like a soft conductor's hand to signal the start of night's movement. By the 1970s, melatonin was no longer just a chemical curiosity. It was being called the sleep hormone. Newspapers and journals began to reference it as the secret behind slumber. Yet in truth, melatonin did not cause sleep directly. It prepared the body for it. It was like dimming the lights in a theater before the curtain rises, a cue that the performance of rest was about to begin. Studies revealed that melatonin lowered body temperature slightly, slowed metabolism, and quieted neural activity in certain brain regions. In people who took small doses, these changes mirrored the natural approach of nighttime rest, a subtle, physiological sigh. But melatonin's story was not only about humans. In animals, its effects were even more profound. In birds, it guided migration. In mammals, it regulated breeding and hibernation. For Arctic reindeer, whose days and nights could last weeks, the gland's signals adjusted to the endless twilight, maintaining rhythm even without sunrise. The hormones seemed to encode the very language of time, daily, seasonal, and cosmic. Scientists began to speak of chronobiology, the study of biological time. What Lerner had discovered was now the cornerstone of a new science. Researchers tracked melatonin in plants, insects, fish, and primates, and found the same pattern again and again. Light suppressed it, darkness restored it. The molecule of night was truly universal. In hospitals, doctors began to wonder if disruptions of this rhythm explained certain illnesses. Could sleeplessness, depression, or jet lag be traced to broken cycles of melatonin release? In the 1970s and 80s, a wave of studies began to test that idea. Shift workers forced to labor under bright lights at unnatural hours showed flattened melatonin rhythms, their internal clocks confused by artificial day. Astronauts, moving through multiple days in orbit, experienced similar disruption. Even travelers crossing time zones suffered from delayed melatonin peaks, explaining their exhaustion. The evidence pointed toward a simple truth. The pineal gland was the body's night compass, and when that compass was disturbed, the mind lost its sense of rest. Melatonin became the quiet center of a growing realization that modern life had drifted out of sync with its own biology. Yet for all this discovery, melatonin remained elusive as a treatment. The hormone was delicate and doses were hard to standardize. Early trials were small, often inconsistent. Some showed benefits in sleep onset and jet lag, others showed little effect. Scientists agreed that melatonin was the messenger of night, but they still debated whether giving more of it could truly summon sleep. Still, fascination grew. In the dim glow of laboratories, researchers imagined a world where sleeplessness could be soothed by restoring the body's natural rhythm. And though the science advanced carefully, outside those walls the culture was already racing ahead. By the late 1980s, the modern world was sleeping less. Electric light had long conquered darkness, televisions glowed in bedrooms, and neon signs kept cities awake. The ancient rhythm that once guided humanity through sunset and sunrise had been fractured by the artificial day. People spoke of insomnia epidemics, of stress, of minds that could not stop thinking. And somewhere amid that restlessness, a hormone born in the dark waited to be rediscovered. In the decades that followed, melatonin would leave the laboratory and enter daily life, in capsules, sprays, and teas, promised as nature's sleep aid. But before that chapter unfolded, the scientific groundwork had to be laid. Researchers would continue to map its pathways, its chemistry, and its influence, slowly revealing just how the molecule of night worked its magic. The world had named melatonin. Now it was learning to understand it. It was a paradoxical substance, invisible in light, powerful in darkness. It did not force rest but invited it, guiding the body toward stillness with the same quiet authority as the stars turning overhead. And so, by the close of the 1970s, scientists began to realize what poets and mystics had felt all along. That sleep was not simply the shutting down of the body, but the awakening of a different kind of order, a return to balance between light and dark, day and night. Melatonin was not a chemical that made one sleep. It was the whisper that said, "Now you may." By the dawn of the 1980s, a quiet revolution was underway. For centuries, the study of sleep had been confined to the bedchamber, the patient, the dream. Now, thanks to melatonin, science had begun to look upward toward light itself. The story of sleep was no longer just about rest. It was about rhythm. The world had discovered the body's hidden clock, and researchers were racing to learn how it kept its time. The key lay in understanding the circadian rhythm, from the Latin circa diem, meaning about a day. Every living thing, from the simplest microbe to the human brain, followed this 24-hour pattern. Light and darkness were its gears. The pineal gland and melatonin, its steady pendulum. In laboratories around the world, scientists began isolating humans and animals from the external cues of time. They sealed volunteers in underground bunkers, cutting off all sunlight, clocks, and outside sounds. The subjects ate and slept whenever they wished, unaware of day or night. What happened was astonishing. Even without any cues from the sun, their bodies continued to follow a near 24-hour cycle. They grew sleepy and alert at the same times each day, their body temperatures rising and falling in perfect rhythm. This meant that time was not something imposed on life by the environment. It was built into life itself. Each cell contained a tiny timekeeper, a molecular metronome ticking in harmony with the Earth's rotation. Melatonin was the messenger that synchronized those clocks. When darkness fell, the pineal gland released it into the bloodstream, signaling to every cell, "Night has come, conserve your strength, prepare for rest." When light returned, the message ceased, and the body awakened again to action and repair. But how did light reach the pineal gland? That question led to one of the most elegant discoveries in modern biology. At the back of the eyes, nestled among the rods and cones that sense color and shape, scientists found a third kind of photoreceptor, cells whose only purpose was to measure brightness. These cells, using a pigment called melanopsin, sent signals through a nerve pathway directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the brain's master clock. From there, the signal traveled to the pineal gland, regulating its secretion of melatonin. It was a perfect system. Light to eye, eye to brain, brain to gland, gland to blood, blood to body. Every dawn and dusk, the cycle reset. As researchers mapped this pathway, they realized how fragile it was. Modern life, with its lamps and screens, had flooded the night with artificial light, tricking the brain into thinking it was still day. The pineal gland, sensing brightness long after sunset, withheld melatonin, and the body's inner clock slipped out of tune. People stayed awake longer, slept less deeply, and woke less restored. In the past, darkness was a friend, a cue to rest. Now it had been banished, and the world was learning the cost. Chronobiology, the study of time in living systems, blossomed during these years. Laboratories became temples of rhythm. Researchers measured the oscillations of hormones, the cycling of genes, the timing of temperature and heartbeat. They discovered that nearly every organ, liver, lungs, heart, skin, possessed its own circadian rhythm, a local clock tuned by melatonin's nightly signal. The human body, it turned out, was not governed by a single clock, but by a constellation of them, each marking the passage of the day in its own quiet way. And always, at the center of that constellation, was light. Light had always symbolized awakening, knowledge, creation. But now science revealed its subtler truth, that too much light could unmake the very order it once inspired. Studies began to show how exposure to bright light at night delayed melatonin release, pushing back sleep onset and fracturing rest. Factory workers under fluorescent bulbs, nurses in overnight wards, and city dwellers bathed in neon all shared the same invisible affliction. Their bodies no longer knew when it was night. The implications rippled far beyond sleep. Melatonin's rhythmic rise and fall regulated more than rest. It influenced metabolism, immune strength, blood pressure, and mood. Disturb its rhythm, and all those systems wavered. Doctors began to notice that shift workers suffered higher rates of heart disease and depression. Travelers crossing time zones spoke of the strange disorientation of jet lag, the body's internal clock struggling to match the sun's foreign pace. In all these phenomena, melatonin was the invisible thread linking biology to the turning of the planet. By the late 1980s, researchers spoke of a circadian crisis in modern society. Humanity, they warned, had built a world that never slept, but biology still demanded darkness. The discovery of melatonin had not only revealed how we sleep, it had shown how deeply light and time sculpt our health. Some scientists began to experiment with re-entraining the body clock using controlled light and melatonin supplementation. They found that small, precisely timed doses of melatonin could shift the rhythm of sleep forward or backward, easing the adjustment to new time zones or night work. Others tested bright light therapy in the morning to suppress melatonin earlier and treat seasonal depression. The idea was revolutionary. By mastering melatonin's rhythm, one could master the rhythm of life itself. This era also brought an aesthetic beauty to the science. Researchers began to speak of the body as an orchestra of clocks. Each cell was a musician, following the same score but playing slightly out of phase. Melatonin was the nightly conductor who raised her baton, uniting the ensemble in darkness. Through the glow of fluorescent labs and the quiet hum of data recorders, a poetic truth emerged. Life is not only built of matter, but of rhythm. Every heartbeat, breath, and blink echoes the movement of the sun. Every night, melatonin restores that harmony, reminding us, even when we forget, that we belong to the cycle of light and dark. As the science of circadian biology flourished, the world around it grew more restless. The 24-hour economy demanded round-the-clock wakefulness, flights leapt across continents, and glowing screens entered every home. Humanity, enthralled by artificial light, had inverted its oldest rhythm. And in that inversion, sleep became precious again, a treasure sought in the very science that had illuminated it. Melatonin had come to represent something larger than a molecule. It was a symbol of alignment, the possibility that, even in a sleepless world, balance could still be restored. In the decades to come, that idea would blossom into an entire industry of sleep aids and supplements. But here, in the luminous laboratories of the late 20th century, the story was still one of wonder. Scientists had finally seen how a single molecule could translate light into time, how the ancient pineal gland, once thought the seat of the soul, was indeed the seat of rhythm. The darkness had never been empty. It was full of chemistry, precision, and purpose. And somewhere in that darkness, as night fell across the turning earth, the pineal gland began its nightly work once more, releasing melatonin into the bloodstream, painting the body in calm, guiding it toward the quiet where healing begins. The 20th century had conquered the night. Electric light had erased the boundaries that once divided dusk from dawn, and the human day, once ruled by the sun, now belonged to the hum of machines, the glow of glass, and the endless rhythm of human ambition. In this new, illuminated world, darkness became optional. Street lamps replaced stars, screens replaced campfires, and humanity forgot that its biology had been written for a slower, dimmer time. The planet's oldest rhythm, the dance of light and melatonin, began to falter. For millions, this disruption revealed itself as a quiet unease. They called it restlessness. It was not pain, not sickness, but a subtle dissonance, the feeling of being awake when one should sleep, of lying in bed while the mind refused to surrender. For others, it appeared as exhaustion that no rest could cure. Their bodies had forgotten how to align with the dark. The rise of jet travel made this imbalance visible for the first time. In the early decades of air travel, crossing oceans took days. The body had time to adjust to new rhythms. But when the jet engine arrived in the 1950s, time itself was compressed. One could leave London at dusk and arrive in New York still under the same sun. The body's internal clock, however, did not fly so quickly. Passengers landed dazed and sleepless, their circadian rhythm stranded in another time zone. Doctors gave this phenomenon a name: jet lag. It was the first global proof that the human clock was not a metaphor but a mechanism. The pineal gland, still attuned to the old planet's rotation, struggled to adjust. Melatonin was still being released according to the night of the departure city, not the destination. The result was confusion, hunger at midnight, fatigue at noon, wakefulness when the sky was dark. Scientists studying pilots and travelers noticed that their melatonin cycles took days to catch up to the local time. The direction of travel mattered. Flying east was worse, for it shortened the day, forcing the body to advance its rhythm unnaturally. Flying west, which lengthened the day, was easier. Nature, it seemed, tolerated delay better than haste. But the skies were only the beginning. On the ground, a quieter revolution was changing life more profoundly. Factories, hospitals, and control towers began operating through the night. Shift work became the new frontier of human endurance, a way to stretch productivity beyond daylight's limits. Men and women worked under artificial lamps while the world outside slept. When they emerged in the morning, blinking under real sunlight, their bodies felt betrayed. Their melatonin cycles were inverted, high when they needed to be awake, low when they wished to sleep. The body's tide of night was flowing at the wrong time. Doctors called it shift work-sleep disorder. The symptoms were subtle but pervasive: insomnia, fatigue, digestive trouble, mood swings. Over time, the cost deepened. Studies linked chronic circadian disruption to heart disease, obesity, and depression. The body's clock, it turned out, was not a small thing that could be ignored. It was the silent foundation of every system: metabolism, immunity, emotion. When that foundation cracked, everything above it trembled. Meanwhile, the modern home was changing too. The invention of television, and later the computer screen, brought new light into the night. What had once been an evening lit by the soft warmth of candles or lamps was now flooded by the blue-white glow of cathode rays, and this light, invisible to the eye's sense of color, was precisely the wavelength that most strongly suppressed melatonin. Without realizing it, people had built devices that told the brain, "It is still daytime, even at midnight." The pineal gland, ever obedient, withheld melatonin. The body stayed alert, heart rate high, cortisol unsoftened. And so, entire societies began to live slightly out of sync with the world's turning. Sleep became a commodity, measured, scheduled, optimized. Doctors prescribed pills, companies sold blackout curtains, and magazines promised biohacks for rest. Yet the answer had always been inside the human body, the quiet molecule that responded to darkness, that needed only the night to be restored. In laboratories, scientists studying melatonin cycles began to see modern restlessness as a kind of biological jet lag, not across oceans, but within the same room. Artificial light had moved humanity a few hours east of nature, and few could find their way back. Experiments with melatonin supplementation began quietly. Travelers took small doses before flights, testing whether they could reset their clocks. Nurses and factory workers tried it before sleep, seeking a hint of calm after long, bright shifts. The results were encouraging but inconsistent. Timing was everything. Too early and it did nothing. Too late and it made the next day's rhythm worse. The truth was subtle but profound. Melatonin could not force sleep. It could invite it, like the dimming of a stage light before a performance. It could remind the body that it was night, even when the world refused to darken. By the 1980s, scientists were publishing more studies connecting melatonin to jet lag, shift work, and insomnia. A small community of chronobiologists, once considered fringe thinkers, were now being consulted by airlines and hospitals. Their advice was simple: respect the light. Expose yourself to bright light in the morning, they said, to anchor your clock. Avoid screens and harsh light before bed. Sleep in true darkness, so the pineal gland can sing its nightly melody of melatonin. It was poetic, almost ancient advice, a scientific echo of what humanity had always known before electricity. As these ideas spread, a new respect for circadian health began to grow. Some architects designed offices with skylights that shifted brightness through the day. Airlines experimented with cabin lighting to ease jet lag. Even space agencies consulted melatonin researchers to help astronauts sleep in orbit, where the sun rose and set every 90 minutes. Through all this, melatonin remained the quiet protagonist, never loud, never commanding, but essential. It did not demand obedience, it simply rewarded alignment. When darkness fell and melatonin rose, the body remembered itself, slowing, cooling, breathing. When dawn arrived and melatonin faded, wakefulness returned, soft and natural. But in the rush of modern life, few remembered to listen. Humanity had learned to fly faster than time, to work longer than daylight, to stare into light long after the stars appeared. Yet the pineal gland had not changed. Deep inside the brain, it still kept the same rhythm as our ancestors who slept by the fire and woke with the dawn. Melatonin became, in a sense, a bridge between the world we had built and the world that had built us. It was nature's last reminder, a whisper from the ancient dark: slow down, it is night. In the decades to come, that whisper would grow louder, not through mysticism but through medicine. The science of melatonin would soon enter the marketplace: capsules, tablets, sprays, promising the return of rest to a sleepless world. But in this era, the age of jet lag and neon, melatonin still belonged to the night itself, to the unseen rhythms within every beating heart. It waited patiently for humanity to remember that even in a world of endless light, we were still creatures of the dark. By the time the 1990s arrived, melatonin had traveled a long way, from the pineal glands of frogs and cows to the test tubes of scientists, from the quiet rhythms of biology to the bright lights of modern life. It had begun as a molecule of mystery, discovered by accident in a Yale laboratory. But in the restless final decade of the 20th century, it became something much larger, a symbol of humanity's yearning for natural rest in an unnatural world. The modern age was awake. Jet travel, late-night work, glowing screens, and 24-hour news had made sleeplessness one of the defining conditions of contemporary life. Pharmacies overflowed with sedatives, stimulants, and sleep aids that promised to silence the mind, but none restored the rhythm. They induced unconsciousness, not peace. People woke groggy, their cycles no more aligned than before. Then, quietly at first, melatonin stepped onto the stage. The earliest experiments in supplementing melatonin dated back to the 1970s and 80s, but it was not until the 1990s that the idea caught fire. Researchers published papers showing that small, timed doses could help travelers recover from jet lag faster, assist night shift workers in falling asleep, and even improve sleep onset in the elderly, whose natural melatonin production declined with age. The studies were modest, but the implications were huge. Here was a molecule that the body already produced, a chemical of night itself, available in pill form. In the United States, where dietary supplement laws were changing, melatonin entered the market almost overnight. It did not require a prescription because it was not classified as a drug. It was legally a nutritional supplement. Suddenly, bottles of melatonin appeared on pharmacy shelves beside vitamins and herbal remedies. Each capsule contained a few milligrams of the hormone that had once been measured in trillionths of a gram in the bloodstream. The public embraced it with enthusiasm bordering on awe. To a generation fatigued by technology and burdened by stress, melatonin seemed like the perfect answer, natural, safe, and rooted in the body's own design. The media called it the miracle molecule of sleep. Headlines promised a natural cure for jet lag and the hormone that resets time. For once, a scientific discovery had leapt almost instantly from laboratory to living room. Sales soared. Travelers packed melatonin alongside passports and toothbrushes. Shift workers swallowed it before daylight naps. College students used it before exams to force sleep upon anxious minds. Older adults, reading of its benefits in newspapers and magazines, began taking it nightly. Within a few years, millions around the world were supplementing a hormone that had, for most of history, remained a silent partner of the night. But the simplicity of melatonin's story, a natural molecule, a safe sleep aid, belied its complexity. Scientists urged caution. Melatonin, they reminded the public, was not a sleeping pill but a signal. It did not knock one unconscious. It nudged the internal clock toward night. Its timing mattered more than its dose. Take it too early, and it could make one drowsy when wakefulness was needed. Take it too late, and it could push sleep even further away. Still, the appeal of control was irresistible. For the first time, ordinary people could manipulate their own circadian rhythms. They could shift their biological night forward or backward, taming jet lag, rebalancing sleep, reclaiming rest. The molecule that once moved silently through darkness was now bottled, labeled, and sold by the millions. Scientists continued to study it with fascination and skepticism. They found that melatonin was not only about sleep. It influenced reproduction, aging, and even antioxidant defense. Its ability to scavenge free radicals hinted that it might protect cells from stress and degeneration. Some researchers began to speculate that melatonin's true purpose was not just to tell time, but to preserve life, a nightly repair mechanism woven into the rhythm of darkness. For the public, though, the message was simpler. Melatonin helped them sleep. As the decade advanced, Its image evolved from scientific marvel to cultural phenomenon. Sleep clinics recommended it for insomnia. Travel magazines praised it for jet lag. Even astronauts were given it aboard the International Space Station, where sunrise and sunset came 16 times each day. Yet not all nations embraced it equally. In the United States, where supplements were lightly regulated, melatonin flowed freely. In much of Europe, it remained available only by prescription, its use confined to clinical supervision. Scientists there argued that hormones should not be taken casually, that the long-term effects of supplementation were not fully known. Their caution was well-founded. Melatonin acted on every cell, influencing systems far beyond sleep. Still, the world's appetite for rest was insatiable. By the late 1990s, the global melatonin market had become a multi-million-dollar industry. Advertising spoke of natural rhythm and ancient balance, turning the molecule of night into both commodity and comfort. People began to associate it not just with sleep, but with serenity itself, the promise of calm in a world too bright and too fast. But even as it spread, the scientific community kept refining its understanding. They discovered that melatonin production peaked early in life and declined gradually with age. Teenagers, who often slept late, showed delayed melatonin rhythms, a biological reason for their nocturnal habits. Elderly people, waking early, produced less of the hormone. These findings offered compassion where once there had been judgment. Sleeplessness was not weakness or laziness, but chemistry. Doctors also learned that melatonin was most effective when used to reset rhythms rather than induce sleep directly. A small dose taken at the same time each night could help retrain the body's internal clock, aligning it once more with natural cycles of light and dark. In essence, melatonin worked not by overpowering the body, but by reminding it how to rest. The supplement revolution was more than a market. It was a mirror reflecting humanity's longing to reconnect with nature's rhythm. For centuries, people had feared the night, filling it with fire and noise. Now they sought to reclaim it, bottle it, and swallow it in hopes of remembering how to dream. It was both poetic and ironic. To find rest, the modern world had turned to a hormone of darkness, a substance that told every cell to surrender to night. Melatonin, once hidden deep in the brain's shadows, had become a household name. It was no longer a secret molecule known only to scientists. It was a symbol of restoration, a quiet rebellion against sleeplessness, a whisper from the body saying, "You still belong to the rhythm of the earth." And yet, even in this triumph, questions lingered. Could something so simple truly heal the chaos of modern life? Was melatonin a key or merely a comfort? The world had rediscovered the messenger of night. Now it would have to learn how to listen to what it said. By the turn of the 21st century, melatonin had become a worldwide companion to sleeplessness. Millions took it nightly, some to cross time zones, some to calm restless minds, others simply to find peace in an age that refused to dim its lights. Bottles lined the shelves of pharmacies, their labels gentle and reassuring. Natural, safe, restful. But in laboratories and universities, scientists were asking harder questions. What did melatonin truly do? How safe was it when taken daily for years? Could something as ancient as darkness, distilled into a pill, truly heal the wounds of modern wakefulness? The answers, as always in science, were layered, not simple truths but constellations of nuance. Melatonin's discovery had been a triumph of curiosity, but its rise as a supplement was a triumph of culture. People wanted to believe in it, in the idea that the human body, thrown off balance by modernity, could be restored by returning to its own chemistry. For many, it worked. They fell asleep faster, woke clearer, and felt they had reconnected with something primal. For others, it did little or nothing. To understand why, researchers delved deeper into melatonin's workings. They discovered that the molecule's role in sleep was not to cause unconsciousness but to shift time. It was the signal that said night has come, synchronizing countless processes, temperature, metabolism, hormone release, that prepared the body for rest. Taking melatonin at the wrong time could therefore mislead the body's clock instead of correcting it. The key was timing, not quantity. A tiny dose taken 2 hours before natural bedtime could move the sleep phase earlier, while the same dose taken after midnight could delay it. Larger amounts often made no difference. Melatonin did not obey the logic of dose and effect like a sedative. It was, as one researcher described, a whisper to the clock, not a hammer. This realization tempered the early enthusiasm. Scientists urged the public to treat melatonin not as a universal sleep aid, but as a tool for specific disruptions: jet lag, shift work, or certain circadian disorders. They cautioned that chronic use might interfere with the body's natural production, though evidence was mixed. The molecule that had seemed so simple was, in truth, part of a vast and delicate system. Yet despite warnings, melatonin's popularity continued to grow. By the 2010s, it was one of the most widely used supplements in the world. Parents gave it to children with insomnia. Athletes used it to recover from travel. Elderly patients used it to ease twilight restlessness. In many households, melatonin was taken as casually as a vitamin, a nightly ritual of modern life. The scientific community responded with waves of studies, testing everything from its short-term effects on sleep latency to its long-term influence on hormones, growth, and mood. The results were reassuring but cautious. Melatonin appeared remarkably safe, even in large doses, with minimal side effects. Yet it was also unpredictable. Its effectiveness varied widely between individuals, depending on genetics, age, and light exposure. One of the most fascinating discoveries of this era came from chronopharmacology, the study of how the timing of a drug affects its outcome. Researchers found that the body's sensitivity to melatonin changed throughout the day. A small dose at the right moment could shift the circadian clock by hours. The same dose at another time might do nothing at all. It was less a pill than a message, one that had to be delivered precisely. Skepticism also deepened. Some doctors argued that melatonin's rise reflected society's impatience more than science's certainty. Sleep, they said, was not a switch to be flipped, but a relationship to be repaired with light, with time, with the self. "We have learned," wrote one sleep researcher, "to live against our biology. Melatonin reminds us that biology always has the final word." Others pointed to the inconsistency in commercial supplements. Tests revealed that some over-the-counter melatonin products contained far more or less than their labels claimed. In a market largely unregulated, quality varied wildly. A hormone once measured in picograms by scientists was now being mass-produced in grams by manufacturers. The line between medicine and metaphor had blurred. And yet, amid the skepticism, new fields of discovery emerged. Scientists found melatonin receptors throughout the body, not only in the brain, but in the heart, gut, liver, and immune cells. The hormone appeared to act as an antioxidant, protecting cells from damage by neutralizing free radicals. It influenced inflammation, blood pressure, even cancer cell growth in laboratory studies. This expanded vision of melatonin transformed it again, from the sleep hormone to a potential guardian of cellular health. Researchers began to describe it as a molecule of balance, restoring equilibrium wherever time and stress had worn it down. The paradox deepened. Melatonin was both specific and universal, fragile and resilient, ancient and newly relevant. While scientists refined their understanding, society's relationship with darkness continued to evolve. Screens became smaller, closer, and brighter. People scrolled through artificial light until moments before closing their eyes, unaware that their pineal glands were still reading daylight. Sleep scientists coined a new phrase, social jet lag, to describe the chronic misalignment between human biology and human behavior. We were, in effect, traveling across time zones without leaving our bedrooms. In this context, melatonin became more than a supplement. It became a symbol, a quiet rebellion against the tyranny of light. Taking melatonin was not only an attempt to fall asleep. It was an act of remembering that we were creatures of rhythm, not machines of output. By the 2020s, research had grown more sophisticated. Melatonin analogs, lab-designed molecules that mimicked its structure but acted longer or more precisely, entered medicine under brand names, prescribed for insomnia and circadian disorders. These drugs sought to harness melatonin's power without the unpredictability of supplements. Still, the natural hormone retained its allure. It was gentle, affordable, and familiar, the rare medicine that asked us not to fight our bodies but to listen to them. Scientists continued to debate its full potential. Could melatonin slow aging by protecting DNA from nightly oxidative stress? Could it enhance immunity or support mental health by stabilizing circadian rhythm? Each new study added pieces to the puzzle but no final picture. Like the night sky, melatonin's story remained vast, full of confirmed constellations and mysterious gaps. In the end, the science and the skepticism were two sides of the same truth. Melatonin was neither miracle nor myth. It was a reminder, a biological echo of the world's oldest pattern. When night falls and the eyes grow heavy, it is not the pill that brings sleep but the restoration of rhythm, the realignment of life with the turning earth. The age of wonder had given way to the age of understanding. But even in understanding, wonder remained. For every molecule of melatonin released into the bloodstream was a whisper from the ancient dark. You are still part of the night, and the night still knows how to heal you. By the time the new millennium matured, scientists had begun to realize that melatonin was not merely a sleep molecule. It was a guardian that kept watch over the body long after the eyelids had closed. What began as a hormone of rest was turning out to be a hormone of renewal, its influence extending into every corner of biology. The first hints of this broader role came not from sleep studies, but from laboratories studying oxidative stress, the slow rust of life. Inside every cell, energy is produced by mitochondria, tiny furnaces that burn oxygen to create fuel. But this process, essential for survival, also produces reactive oxygen molecules, free radicals that can damage DNA, proteins, and membranes. The body counteracts this with antioxidants, molecules that neutralize the radicals before they cause harm. In the 1990s, researchers discovered that melatonin was one of these protectors. In test tubes, it scavenged free radicals with astonishing efficiency, more potent than vitamin C or E. Unlike many antioxidants, it could slip easily across cell membranes and even enter the nucleus, guarding DNA itself. It was as if the molecule of night had also been designed to defend life against the wear of time. The implications were vast. Every night, when darkness fell and melatonin rose, it was not only telling the body to sleep, it was orchestrating repair. As metabolism slowed, melatonin swept through the bloodstream, calming inflammation, protecting neurons, and aiding in the nightly rebuilding of tissues. Sleep, long known to be restorative, now had a molecular explanation. The darkness healed because melatonin worked within it. Further research found that melatonin interacted with the immune system. It modulated the release of cytokines, the signaling molecules of immunity, ensuring that inflammation burned hot enough to defend, but not so hot as to harm. It enhanced the production of immune cells at night, when pathogens were most likely to invade. The rhythm of defense, like the rhythm of sleep, was tied to the rise and fall of this silent hormone. In cancer research, scientists found even more curious clues. Some tumors grew more slowly when melatonin levels were high. Others thrived when the rhythm was broken by constant light exposure. In laboratory animals, maintaining a natural light-dark cycle seemed to bolster resilience. While these findings did not make melatonin a cure, they revealed a truth both poetic and biological. Light and dark were not opposites, but partners in health. The study of melatonin's broader influence began to reshape medicine itself. The body was no longer seen as a machine running on fixed cycles, but as a living clock, every process ticking to its own rhythm. The heart released hormones in pulses, the liver changed its metabolism by hour, the brain cleansed itself during sleep, and melatonin stood at the center of this temporal architecture, synchronizing it all with the rotation of the planet. Even mood, once thought purely psychological, was found to dance to melatonin's rhythm. Seasonal affective disorder, the sadness that descends during dark winters, correlated with diminished daylight and disrupted melatonin cycles. In some people, the hormone's nightly peak came too early or too late, misaligning body and environment. Bright light therapy in the morning and small doses of melatonin at night began to restore balance, easing depression by reuniting biology with sunlight. The molecule that told the body when to rest was also teaching it when to renew, when to defend, when to feel. In the 2000s, neuroscientists discovered melatonin receptors in places far beyond the pineal gland, in the retina, gut, pancreas, skin, and reproductive organs. Each tissue seemed to read melatonin's message in its own language. In the gut, it regulated digestion. In the pancreas, it influenced insulin release. In the ovaries, it guided reproductive timing. Melatonin's nightly surge was like the tide of an invisible sea washing through every organ, cleansing, synchronizing, restoring. The presence of melatonin in plants astonished even seasoned biochemists. It turned out that leaves, seeds, and fruits also produced melatonin, not for sleep, but for protection. Plants used it to defend themselves against ultraviolet radiation, drought, and toxins. Across evolution, melatonin had been conserved as nature's molecule of balance, bridging the kingdoms of life. In aging research, melatonin revealed another secret. As people grew older, their pineal glands calcified slightly, and melatonin production diminished. The nightly signal faded, and with it came shallower sleep, slower recovery, and weaker immunity. Some scientists began to wonder if the decline of melatonin was not merely a symptom of aging but a contributor to it. In animals, supplementing melatonin seemed to preserve youthfulness, prolonging lifespan, maintaining fertility, and protecting memory. Though human results remained uncertain, the idea resonated deeply. Perhaps aging was, in part, the erosion of rhythm. As evidence accumulated, the image of melatonin evolved again, from the sleep hormone to the hormone of harmony. It was the biochemical embodiment of balance between light and dark, activity and rest, oxidation and repair. The most profound realization, however, was philosophical as much as biological. For all its complexity, melatonin's purpose remained simple. It reminded living things of the rhythm that gave them life. It translated the spinning of the planet into the language of cells, turning cosmic motion into molecular time. In a world increasingly detached from nature's cycles, melatonin stood as a bridge, a thread connecting humanity back to the Earth's rotation, to the quiet truth that health depends not only on nutrients and exercise, but on alignment with the day's unfolding. The molecule's role in medicine continued to expand. Researchers explored its potential in neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, where disrupted sleep and oxidative stress played major roles. Some trials suggested benefits in preserving cognitive function or easing symptoms. Others studied melatonin's ability to protect the heart, reduce blood pressure, and improve metabolic health. Each discovery reinforced the same message. Melatonin was not a sedative, not an escape, but a rhythm restorer. It did not override the body, it reminded it of what it had forgotten. By the 2020s, melatonin had become a symbol of holistic science, a meeting point between medicine, psychology, and ecology. Its nightly rise was proof that the body and the earth shared the same heartbeat. Every evening, as the sky dimmed and the pineal gland began its gentle release, millions of cells prepared for the silent work of healing. DNA was repaired, immune defenses strengthened, memories consolidated. all of it guided by a molecule discovered by chance in the skin of a frog. When humanity learned of melatonin's deeper power, it also rediscovered something ancient. That rest is not the absence of life, but its renewal. Sleep is not surrender, but preparation. Darkness is not the enemy of light, but its companion. Melatonin had shown science the wisdom of night. The story of melatonin is, in truth, the story of rhythm itself. The pulse of time within living things. The soft voice of night that has whispered since the beginning of life. From the first one-celled organism that sensed the turning of the earth, to the human being staring into the glow of a midnight screen, all life has been guided by this unseen metronome. For billions of years, the alternation of light and dark shaped the planet. The earliest creatures learned to feed, move, and rest according to that pattern. Some followed the sun, others hid from it. Those that thrived learned balance, activity in the day, renewal in the night. That balance became encoded in every gene, every breath, every heartbeat. And in that balance, nature placed a molecule small, simple, and timeless to keep the rhythm true. That molecule was melatonin. In its chemical form, melatonin is modest, just a scattering of atoms, easily overlooked among the grand symphonies of biology. But in its meaning, it is profound. It is the translator between the vast motions of the universe and the quiet motions of the body. Every sunset that lowers the light also raises melatonin within us. Every sunrise that floods the sky also stills it again. Through this dance, we remain synchronized with the cosmos without even realizing it. When Aaron Lerner isolated melatonin in 1958, he could not have imagined the full scope of what he had found. He saw a pigment regulator in the skin of a frog. He uncovered, without knowing, a universal clock. In the decades that followed, his discovery evolved from biochemistry to philosophy, a symbol of the deep interconnectedness of all living things. For a time, melatonin was hailed as a wonder drug, a natural sedative, a shield against age and stress. But as the years passed, scientists came to understand something gentler. Melatonin was never meant to overpower the body. It was meant to harmonize it. Its power lay not in potency, but in timing. The pineal gland, that small, forgotten organ once called the seat of the soul, now stands as a monument to the elegance of design. It does not control thought or emotion, as Descartes once imagined, but it does something equally mysterious. It translates starlight into chemistry. The same photons that left the sun 8 minutes ago, that strike the retina and send signals through the optic nerve, are the ones that tell the pineal gland when to rest. In this way, even as we lie in darkness, we are still connected to the light. That connection, the conversation between day and night, is what melatonin preserves. It is not a sleep hormone, it is a language of balance. When darkness falls and melatonin rises, it does not extinguish awareness but transforms it. The body cools, the mind slows, the immune system awakens. Dreams take shape, memories settle into order, wounds knit in silence. Modern science calls this the circadian rhythm. Ancient poets called it harmony. It is the same truth by another name. The tragedy of the modern age is not that we have lost sleep, but that we have lost reverence for darkness. We have built a world that never dims, forgetting that the body and mind were designed to rest under stars. The discovery of melatonin is therefore also a reminder that progress does not replace nature, it must move in rhythm with it. In the quiet of night, as melatonin seeps through the bloodstream, the body becomes a world of renewal. Neurons repair themselves, DNA damage is mended, immune cells patrol the body's edges like guardians of the frontier. The body does not merely pause, it heals. And when morning arrives, melatonin retreats, handing the reins back to light. The handover is silent, perfect, and daily. In this eternal alternation lies the deepest wisdom of life. Nothing endures by staying constant. Everything endures by knowing when to move and when to rest. Melatonin teaches that lesson at the molecular level. It is the chemistry of stillness. As scientists continue to study it, they find new roles still. in reproduction, mood regulation, cancer prevention, heart protection, even in plants' resistance to drought. The more we learn, the clearer it becomes that melatonin is not a mere human hormone but a universal principle. It is the night's signature on the book of life. And yet, for all its vastness, it remains personal. It governs the most intimate of experiences. The moment when thought fades, breath slows, and consciousness surrenders to rest. It shapes the rhythm of childhood and old age, of work and dream, of waking and healing. It is the pulse behind every eyelid when darkness arrives. If one could look through time, one might see humanity's relationship with light and dark as a great pendulum. We began in perfect balance, rising with dawn, sleeping at dusk. Then we conquered fire, lamps, electricity, and finally digital light. We pushed the night aside, proud of our power to outshine the stars. But the body, older and wiser than civilization, remembered. It whispered through fatigue, through restlessness, through sleepless eyes, "You are out of time." And in that whisper, melatonin speaks. It speaks not in words but in rhythm, lowering the pulse, cooling the blood, inviting the mind back into the ancient conversation between light and dark. Every time we close our eyes, we are not withdrawing from life but returning to its foundation. In this way, melatonin becomes something more than a hormone. It becomes a kind of truth. That peace is not found in brightness or speed, but in the willingness to pause. It reminds us that healing requires darkness, that clarity is born of stillness, and that rest is not weakness but wisdom. So when people take melatonin in the modern world, whether as a capsule, a tea, or a quiet breath under dimmed light, they are, perhaps unknowingly, participating in something ancient. They are honoring the balance that built them, rejoining the rhythm that shaped every living thing since the dawn of life. There is a profound comfort in that thought, that inside every human brain is a gland that listens to the sky, that translates the turning of the earth into a nightly promise. You may rest now. The world will keep turning without you. Melatonin is that promise made flesh. In the end, it does not matter whether one sees it as biology or poetry. Its gift is the same. It tells the body to remember that it belongs to the universe, that light and dark are not enemies but companions, that to rest is to renew. The eternal nightlight still burns, not in our cities but within us. It glows softly in the rhythm of our cells, a molecular memory of stars, guiding us home each night to the stillness from which all life begins anew. And when we finally close our eyes, it is not the end of wakefulness, but the continuation of balance, the world's oldest lullaby, sung by a molecule, written in the chemistry of night.